Alrighty, welcome back everyone. It's Garlaanx here bringing you a new Diablo 4 video. And today, as the title suggests, we're going to be looking at the Shadowblight Necromancer build. We're currently on the PTR, the public test realm, looking into Season 5. So anyone that plays a Necromancer should be aware now that minions got buffed. The pure Shadow DOT Necromancer, if you're using Corpse Explosion, was basically nerfed into the ground. I'm going to try to still make it work. I may have a video on it, I may not, we'll see. But I wanted to migrate over to the pure Shadowblight build, and we're going to take a look at that. So if you're unfamiliar with what a Shadowblight build actually is, you're not actually focused on DOT damage. You're just focused on damage from Shadowblight, which is the key passive. So shadow damage infects enemies with Shadowblight for 2 seconds. Every 8th time, which was adjusted, it used to be 10 times, so now it got a slight reduction, which helps out a little bit. But every 8th time an enemy receives shadow damage from you, or your minions, while they are affected by Shadowblight, they take an additional 44% shadow damage. Now this is what we care about. Now this was also increased. It used to be 22%, so they literally doubled it. It's now 44%. And you can see the damage value, 38,000 to 46,000. Now here's the part that matters. Shadowblight's damage is increased by 100% multiplicative of your shadow damage over time bonus. So our current bonus right now is over 1,000%. So it's 1,054%. And we're going to look at that. So if we look at our gear here, you mainly are only focused on the Shadow DOT. So like your gloves, for instance, you're going to get your critical strike, damage over time, and you're going to roll damage over time. Your necklace, you're ideally going to want Amplify damage or Gloom. I just happen to have Terror on PTR. But you're going to roll shadow damage over time. Your rings, you're going to get Critical Strike, Intelligence, and damage over time. And you're going to roll damage over time on both of them. So you're going to get your Critical Strike from your rings and your arm, or your gloves rather. Your weapon, so they now added that necromancers can use axes. Axes are going to have base damage of shadow damage over time. See, a two-handed one has a 40% damage over time. And then, of course, you're looking for one that has damage over time. And then, again, you're going to roll damage over time on it. Now, again, we're on PTR, so we're limited to, what we can do and what we can get. So I only have Masterwork 4. Just to Blizzard, a memo is that on PTR, just give us everything. Like when we create a character and we use that boosting system to boost us to 100, literally just max out our resources. Like literally just give us everything maximized. That way we can re-roll, test everything. We only have 1 week on PTR to test everything. I don't have time to sit here and farm the pit for masterworking materials. Just give us all that stuff up front so we can do legitimate testing. So let's look at our statistics here. Our critical strike chance is 40% base. This goes to 80% when we're using Bone Storm and Grasping Veins. We get 20 from each. So this goes to 80%. Our critical strike damage is 580 because Shadowblight can critical strike. Remember that. Everything on the Shadowblight build is focused on spamming enough damage to get those Shadowblight procs. And this can critically strike, so you want that critical strike chance and critical strike damage. So again, if we look at our damage with Shadow, or damage over time, again, I have that over 1,000% bonus. And like I said, if you have greater affixes on all your gear and everything's masterwork, you can actually push this almost to like 1,600 on ideal rolls. So 1,600 is a pretty significant number. Now what ties this all in together is the decay aspect. And I don't think this is all working appropriately. So like Macro Bio Boy, phenomenal. Necromancer content creator for Diablo. He is way more involved in the math on that side of things. But to me, something's not adding up here. Because when you look at the damage on this, this is not good damage. Like, I don't think this build is going to be viable because either something's broke or something's not being multiplied correctly. Because, like I said, we have 1,000% bonus that we're getting on our damage. And I think the problem may be is that the passive is just not that much damage. So they increased it from 22% to 44%, but that damage is still only 46,000. So when we factor in our current bonus of 1,000, and then you add in your critical strike damage, the numbers just aren't there. And I don't know if this aspect is broke on Decay, but if you read it, each time Shadowblight key passive deals damage to enemies, it increases the next Shadowblight's damage within 10 seconds by 90% because it's on a two-handed weapon, but it stacks to 5 times. So that's 450% more bonus damage on Shadowblight. I was expecting, 100 million, 200 million Shadowblight critical strikes, and we're nowhere near that. So I don't know if things aren't adding up. Like, it's a 4.5% multiplier just on the aspect of Decay alone. And when you factor in everything else, like I said, 1,000 on our shadow damage over time, boosting our Shadowblight. I think Shadowblight base damage is too low. And they increased it by 50%. Like I said, currently on the live servers in Season 4, this is only 22%. They literally doubled it to 44%, and I still don't think that's enough. Not to compete with these other classes. Not with Barbarians doing billions of damage. Not with Sorcerers doing quadrillion damage. Rogues are one-shot and everything. And the Necromancer's just over here like, hey, I'm here, guys. It seems like Blizzard wants everyone to play minions, and that's not fair. Minions are amazing, don't get me wrong, but I like playing other forms of the Necromancer. So, with that being said, like I said, with all the factors and everything, I don't know if things are getting multiplied correctly. Because, like I said, just with the aspect of Decay, this is a 4.5% multiplier. It's 450% multiplicative damage. And things just, to me, are not adding up. Like, we're basically critting for, 40 million. So let's go ahead. We'll start hitting some stuff here. Oh, I have one other thing to mention, too, with this build that suffers. But let's go ahead and try to get this ramped up. So we're looking at those yellow numbers there. There's a 14, there's a 30 million, there's a 49 million. And yeah, that's the damage on Shadowblight, guys. We'll make sure we're keeping our crit up. 32 million, 32 million. You can see the numbers. 20 million, 26 million. These numbers are not competitive. And like I said, this character's not maxed out, but the gear that I do have, I would have expected to see a lot higher numbers than this. We're basically capping out at around the 50 million mark at best. Static numbers, we're looking at 25 million, upwards of 30 million over here. You can see, I think I did have a crit for 74 million, which might be the highest I've done. But like I said, these numbers are not good. Like, this is not competitive. Like, there was a 51 right there. There's a 55 right there. These numbers are not competitive. If you're taking this build into the pit and everything, you're going to get demolished. So, yeah. I don't know if the numbers are adding up correctly. That's something for Macro to look at. He loves crunching the numbers and seeing what's going on and everything. But in my opinion, this build's not viable. Which is sad, because basically the Shadow Necro is just dead right now. The DOT Necro was nerfed into the ground, so I thought, hey, maybe the Shadowblight version of it might actually be better. And it's just, it's not. This is not competitive. I don't know if they need to increase the damage on Shadowblight. I don't know if they need to, I don't know if Decay is actually working properly Because, like I said, on paper, now Blizzard is known. You can't read tooltips, right? Like, my damage is 33,000. My damage is not really 33,000. Like, tooltips in Diablo 4 are nothing but lies. So, I just expected more out of Shadowblight with all these bonuses. And, like, if this was a maxed out character, and let's say I did have all greater affixes on everything, and everything was Masterwork 12, and you're pushing 1,600, 1,700, the damage is not going to increase by that much, to be honest. We may see 100 million crits on Shadowblight, and that's still not competitive compared to the other classes. Like I said, when the other classes are doing billions of damage and burst damage, and we're over here struggling because we have to ramp everything up to just hit 100 million damage. Yeah, I don't know. So I tried switching in the Grandfather too, because it basically doubles your critical strike damage, but then we're losing a ton of DOT damage. Would also have to move Shadowblight to the amulet or whatever, but even without the decay, and if we're just putting the Grandfather on, our stats, my critical strike damage literally doubles, but then as I said, we lose about 300% shadow damage over time, which is unacceptable, unfortunately. This whole build revolves around stacking your shadow damage over time, because that correlates with the Shadowblight damage. So like I said, even with the Doombringer, unfortunately, I'd have to move that aspect to get a real test. But I mean, we're doing like 6 million damage at best. Here's some 10s and 11s, but that's statically we're doing about 6 million. So that's just pathetic. That's no bueno at all. And even if I did move over the decay, which I'll try off camera, I'll move over the decay here and move some stuff around. And try it with the Grandfather, but I just don't think the Grandfather is the play. You lose way too much damage over time. So, it is what it is, guys. The one thing I want to mention with the Shadowblight build is that it does struggle with lucky hit chance. The only place we're getting lucky hit chance is from our helmet. So the only thing you can really do, so our corpse generation is very low. The only thing you can really do is maybe take some of the critical strike off of the rings and put lucky hit on the rings. And that way, our critical strike, you're going to be looking at maybe 70% with Grasping Veins and Bone Storm. Because if we put the lucky hit here, take the critical strike off, if we had the greater affixes and everything, that way we could boost our lucky hit to at least 25-30% maybe. Because the corpse generation is very low on this build if you're just focusing on the critical strike chance, the damage. But the most important thing is that shadow damage over time. So, again, my personal opinion, this is not going to be valid in Season 5. It's just not going to do enough damage, especially if you are going to try to push pit tiers. Are you going to be able to farm the pit up to level 100? Yeah, probably. Are you going to be able to do bosses? Probably. Are you going to be able to do everything else? Probably, if it was maxed out. But pushing the pit? No, unfortunately this is not going to be competitive. I think the Shadowblight damage needs further buffed to make it valid, especially with them nerfing the DOT damage. I mean, it is what it is, guys. Those are my findings. I'm sure other content creators will make videos. Ponyhoff, Macro, Goblin Incorporated, those guys are all big Necromancer guys. Like I said, it is what it is. I just don't think it's going to be a valid build in Season 5, and that's unfortunate. Again, Diablo 4 is now a year old, okay? So it's a year old, and they are continuing to do class balancing. Why things are getting nerfed that don't need nerfed is beyond me. Why is it okay for other classes to be able to do billions of damage and quadrillions of damage, and the Necromancer got basically gutted? Two of its builds are not really valid, in my opinion. The blood builds are struggling as well. It seems like Blizzard literally wants the Necromancer just to be minions at this point. And again, that's not fair in my opinion. I do like the minion builds, don't get me wrong, but I want to play Shadow. That's what I want to play. So Season 5 is going to be interesting. Again, this is on the PTR, Public Test Realm. They're going to take the feedback, maybe change some things and adjust things before everything goes final. But as it sits right now, like I said, I don't think these may be working or multiplying as they should be, because I'm expecting to do at least 100 million damage, and it's not. And I think maybe it's because the base damage is just so low on the passive. Like I said, 40,000 right now, then multiply it by your bonus, and then multiply that by another 4.5, multiply that with your crit damage, and the numbers just aren't seeming to add up. I expected this to do a lot more damage, even though this obviously isn't a maxed out character. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Just a video looking at specifically the Shadowblight build. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it is what it is. I may have a video on Bone Spirit. I'm going to tamper around with that. A basic attack build if I have time. And then if I do have additional time, I'm going to try to make the Shadow DOT work, but I just don't think it's going to. So that's all I got for you folks today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Any questions, comments, or concerns, as always, leave them below. And I'll see you guys real soon.